Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Chilling Tong, and I'm the CEO and the President of the National ACE, National Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber and Entrepreneurship. I want to thank all our affiliate AAPI Chamber and partners here with us. I'm truly excited about today's national briefing on the U.S. Small Business Administration new Restaurant Revitalization Fund, RRF, brought to you by the SBA, PPS, and also the Small Business Roundtable. In the American Rescue Plan Act, signed into law on March 11, 2021, Congress appropriated $28.6 billion for the SBA to award relief through the Restaurant Revitalization Fund program until funds are expended. Fund recipients are not required to repay the funding as long as the funds are used for eligible purpose, no later than March 11, 2023. This is such a great news for Asian American business community. And because, I would say like other minority business community, we are among the hardest hit by the economic downturn during the pandemic. While there was a 22% decline in small business owned activity nationwide, Asian American business owner activity dropped by 26%. Revenue at the local restaurant, especially Asian and Chinese restaurant nationwide, have dropped to 50 to 70%. As many small businesses across the country continue to feel the economic misery stemming from the coronavirus pandemic, AAPI businesses are facing historic unemployment and discrimination. Today's briefing is a part of the administration's national outreach to empower small business owners with educational resources to learn more about the opportunities on how to apply and navigate the application process. We would like to thank our many stakeholder groups for engaging and inviting their members across the country. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Please note this briefing is being recorded. After today's briefing, we'll send you a link to the recording will also be available on our website. I am so honored today to introduce SBA Administrator Isabella Guzman. Isabella Guzman served as the 27th Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration and was sworn in on Wednesday, March 17, 2021. Administrator Guzman represents more than 30 million U.S. small business and is committed to helping small business owners and entrepreneurs start, grow, and be resilient. A lifelong of small business, the administrator grew up as a daughter of a small business owner and learned at a young age how important small business are to the communities they served, the people they employ, and economies they help power. Administrator Guzman, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jiling, for welcoming me here today, as well as for being a champion of SBA's offerings. Your work as CEO and President of National ACE to support our AAPI community during this crisis and beyond has been so vital. So really, truly thank you. I'd also like to thank our friends at Public-Private Strategies Institute for helping to organize this and other important webinars, and just amplifying SBA's programs on an ongoing basis. We know how important connection to information is, and so we appreciate all the support of our nation's small business community. This has been an unprecedented year for the AAPI community, battling both COVID-19 pandemic and alarming levels of hate and violence targeted at these communities. Prejudice, hate, and violence have no place in our nation, and it is our responsibility to condemn it at every opportunity. Over the past year, our nation's restaurants and other food and beverage businesses owned by AAPI community have faced enormous challenges, and I appreciate that, especially having just come from California, where I led on small business and innovative startups as California's small business advocate, and now, of course, is the voice for America's 30 million small businesses. I've witnessed, the particular struggles of our AAPI community during COVID, and yet seeing how many of you have proven unparalleled resilience, adapting and through this struggle and to this new marketplace, facing adversity and racism and finding new ways to do business and improve your operations in the process. We've seen you adapt online ways to connect with your customers, change your operations for COVID safety, adopt technology, find new suppliers, and we know it hasn't been easy. Your grit and determination have been inspiring, and I represent the core of your neighborhoods, your communities, and propel economic activity up and down our main streets across the nation. So we truly appreciate the impact you have in our economy. So today, I want you to know that help customized for you in the food and beverage industry is here, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, which was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Biden last month. And with this new authority, we're giving out $28.6 billion in targeted relief through grants, not loans, grants, to restaurants and other food and beverage businesses who have been impacted by COVID and demonstrated impact on revenues. The grant application portal will be available starting Monday, May 3rd, which is why it's so critical that National ACE is doing this outreach, because we want you to be ready. Across all of our programs and policies, I do want SBA to be as entrepreneurial as the businesses we serve, just like all of you have been, adapting to consumers' needs and pivoting all year long to serve your clients in the community. So we're taking that same approach. We've designed the application for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund with restaurants and food and beverage businesses, you, the end users, in mind, paying particular attention to your reality over the past year and how you've been running your businesses in this new marketplace, because we know it's changed. My capital access team is with me here today, and they'll walk you through all the great features of this program in a few minutes, but I wanted to share a couple of them with you now, just to give you a sense of how we are adapting to serve our small business customers and my priorities as administrator. We have, for example, defined eligible use of funds broadly, so you can deduct a range of expenses from rent, supplies, and business debt, among other items. And we've extended the time period through March 2023 to use these funds. These were important program elements that recognize the challenges that you're facing as restaurants and the types of expenses you're experiencing. We've designed the RRF program to be tech smart as well. We know you've adopted technology at high rates, and it has walk me through type assistance throughout the application, so guidance can pop up as you hover over items if you have any questions as you go. And the application is as simple as possible that we could make it, and it should take about 25 minutes. So we definitely want you to get ready and take advantage of this program. We know that integrating technology partners to increase our outreach and entry point options for this program is really important. So in addition to offering a direct application at sba.gov, we're also partnering with point of sale vendors, which many of you are using now to connect to the SBA portal and provide data for you to apply. So right now we're partnering with Clover, Aloha, Square, and Toast if you use these applications, and we'll be adding new partners as we go. Of course, we've tried to eliminate bureaucratic requirements, as I mentioned, trying to keep a simple application process so that things that don't make sense for your industry were not applied. And we know that our smallest and underserved businesses, especially those owned by people of color, have suffered the most from the pandemic and yet have been unable to access relief in many cases. Congress recognized this when they included language in the American Rescue Plan that mandated a 21-day priority period for restaurants, food and beverage businesses owned by women, veterans, and socially or economically disadvantaged people. And as AAPI entrepreneurs, that means that you will be given priority access to these funds from May 3rd to May 24th. That's really critical since this is a first come, first served program. It's important that you put your application in as soon as possible and take advantage of this priority period. Congress also allocated $5 billion in set-aside specifically targeted to smaller businesses generally, and we added another $4.5 billion to that for various set-asides for smaller businesses. And they also directed us to ensure a broad range of restaurants and food and beverage businesses are eligible for the fund. So food trucks, carts, caterers, breweries, tap rooms, and many more are all included. Our focus on reaching our smallest and underserved businesses is in line with President Biden and Vice President Harris's emphasis on equity, a vision that I'm committed to at the SBA. And we know that all of our small businesses must be supported and given opportunities to succeed if our nation is going to thrive and retain our global competitiveness. And we know it's not just the design, but also the implementation and outreach, which is why today's event is so important and why we are prioritizing accessibility broadly. Another important fact is that the fund's online application portal is available in multiple languages, English and Spanish in the actual direct application, but in addition, translation is available in 8 additional languages, and support and full program guide information is available in up to 17 languages. And a sample of the application is there now at sba.gov/restaurants for you to look at, including Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Thai. And the customer service line is available in multiple languages, and it's open already from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern time, so that you can access services directly in language. We are committed to bringing this customer-first approach, technology, and equity to all of our programs at the SBA so that all of our small businesses can recover, start, grow, and build resilience. So know that SBA has other offerings that fit your business beyond the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And we hope this is an opportunity for us to get to know you and you to get to know us and our offerings. We know that the pandemic will one day end soon, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, the Biden-Harris administration's Shots in Arms campaign, and the dedication of our healthcare workers, of course, on the front lines. Half of all adults in the US have already received at least 1 dose of the vaccine. We know that you want to reopen fully, but also safely. And at the SBA, we're committed to making that happen. We're here to help you get back on your feet and ensure that our restaurants and local food and beverage establishments can survive this pandemic and beyond. I do take my role as the voice of America's small businesses to heart based on my history with my family businesses. And I know the impact small businesses have had on our communities and our economy. And I want them all to feel like the giants that they are in our economy, really representing our future and our growth. So thanks again to ACE, and thank you all for everything you do for your communities, your employees, and our nation's economy out there. I'm going to turn it over now to Diana Seaborn and Ginger Allen, some of my senior leaders at Capital Access, because they're going to go through diligently this incredible Restaurant Revitalization Fund that they've helped create. And we hope that you keep up hope, because we are here to help, and best of luck in this process. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Administrator. Good to see you. This is Diana Seaborn. I'm the Director of the Office of Financial Assistance in the Office of Capital Access in our beloved SBA. Ginger Allen will be joining me. Ginger is a Senior Financial and Lending Specialist in the Office of Capital Access as well. So we've got a lot of material to cover in a really short time. So we're going to rip through some things and try and save some time for some Q&A. And any Q&A that we don't cover in any of these events, we do take back and we give thoughtful review to for the updates of the program. So let's get started, and I'll turn it back to, it's like, okay, so we've put our information on your slide. So thank you, Chilling, for doing that. Is there any other housekeeping things that we need to do before we get started down the path on the presentation?
Diane, I'd like to point out that we've posted links in the chat panel, several different links. The first link is to our public knowledge base. And as Diana mentioned, we've taken live questions that we have received from past audiences, and we've provided the question and the answer in this publicly accessible, searchable knowledge base. So that's the first link posted. And the second link posted is to the website that the administrator mentioned. And that's where we have general information and links to the program guide and to our call center. And then the third link is to the application portal. And as the administrator mentioned, beginning tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern, you can go in and start your registration process. And then beginning Monday, May 3rd, this coming Monday at noon Eastern, you can actually submit your portal at that web address. Thanks,
Right.
Diana.
Thanks, Ginger. And that raises a really good point. That pre-registration will save you a lot of time. As you know, there are many, many anxious people and many, many deserving entrepreneurs that will try to access this program, that will begin to access the program on Monday. So it's important that you go and get a feel for it, get your registration done so that you're ready to go. You can actually take a look and collect all of your documents. So let's kick this thing off and move along, and we'll come back to some of those topics as we go along in the presentation. Madam Administrator advised about the amounts and the legislation that authorized us to provide these funds to you, up to $10 million per restaurant group. They must be used for eligible expenses. A lot more latitude than the PPP had. As you know, there was very restricted eligible use of proceeds for PPP, not so here. It's covering a broad range of your expenses. And of course, 9.5 billion of the fund is prioritized for the smallest businesses. And in fact, at the first 21 days, as the administrator mentioned, we will be gating those that are in minority and underserved, socially and economically disadvantaged women, veteran categories. So this is a self-certification program, and we do have guidance written for you so that you can determine whether you fall into one of those priority categories. Next slide. So these are the eligible entities. We don't really need to read to you. I'm sure that the information on this deck is going to be made available to you by our folks at ACE. So you will have the information after the fact. You will be able to see it on our website, and you will also be able to see it in the portal where you will be uploading your application if you're coming in direct or through one of our point of sale. So you can see here that we are focused on the restaurant industry. We do understand that some certain businesses have a combination of income that may be wholesale and or on-site and sales to the public in food and beverage. So that's all spelled out for you here, and we can move on to the next slide. Okay, let's talk about who is not eligible. State and local government operated businesses are not eligible. As of March 13th, 2020, anyone that owns and operates more than 20 locations, and this is a very important feature because it's not just 20 restaurant locations, 20 eligible locations, it's 20 locations regardless of the industry and whether they are under the same brand or not. So if you have gas stations and you have restaurants, then you must count all of those locations to determine, are you small within the 20 location category? So 20 locations or less, this is driven to a smaller scale, obviously for small businesses. So keep that in mind. All of your businesses count towards the 20 location limit. If you have a pending application for shuttered venues, you're not eligible for this program. It is one or the other. So you need to make a business decision as an operator as to which one most benefits, and make that decision, go ahead and down that path because you can't have both. Publicly traded companies are ineligible for this program. Permanently closed companies that you do not expect to reopen. If you have filed a Chapter 11, and have an approved plan, Chapter 11, 12, and 13, and are under a plan of reorganization, you are eligible. However, if you do not have your plan in place under any filing for chapter bankruptcy, you are not eligible. So you must have your plan in place in order to be eligible. No nonprofit organizations are eligible in this program. Unlike the PPP, the agency made an exception for nonprofit organizations for that program. In this program, we are not funding nonprofit organizations, and the minimum funded grant is $1,000. Next slide. Ginger, did you have anything you wanted to add here before we get started on the eligible expenses?
You mean in terms of the previous slide?
Yes, anything, and then I'll let you take this one and roll.
Sure. One comment on the previous slide, you're also ineligible if you fall in under any of the categories that are mentioned in a particular reg. It's called 13 CFR 120.110. That would apply to you if you, for example, receive more than a third of your revenue through gambling. You would not be eligible. And there are a few other instances outlined in that regulation. We do have a link to that on our website in the program guide. So I just wanted to mention there are a couple of other categories where you might be considered ineligible. So let's move on to all the ways that you can spend your RRF funds. Pretty much anything that would be considered normal operating expenses. So specifically, to spell it out, you can use the funds to make your business payroll, and this includes sick leave, any business utility payments, and what we mean by that is your gas, electric, if you have oil, that type of thing, Wi-Fi accounts, internet, business maintenance expenses, business supplies, and this includes any type of personal protective equipment that you needed to purchase for you and your customers and your employees for the pandemic. Business food and beverage expenses, including raw materials. For example, if you're a microbrewer and part of your operations is to make beer, it includes, it covers the raw materials that you need to do that. Covered supplier costs, business operator expenses. These are your normal day-to-day things that you might incur as a result of being in business. For instance, any insurance payments that you need to make. Marketing is included as well. Moving on to construction expenses. If you need to build new or expand outdoor seating, this is an eligible use of proceeds. You may use the money to do that. However, you may not use RRF funds to expand your business. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean that you can't expand your business. It just means that any money that you use for expanding your business needs to come out of the normal revenues of your business. You just can't use this grant money toward the expansion. Now, business debt payments, this is a big category here. It's pretty broad. As long as it's business debt, you can use RRF funds to make your normally scheduled principal and interest payments on business debt. Now, this is more generous than the measure for PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, because in PPP, you are only allowed to put that money toward interest payments. So with this grant program, you can cover principal and interest, your normally scheduled payments. So not to be used to make prepayments of either principal or interest. You can use it to make your regularly scheduled payment for lines of credit or for business credit card debt as well. Anything else to add there, Diana?
Nope, sounds like it's covered. We can move on.
All right. Please. Yes. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. I know that this is what most folks are really interested in here. How do you calculate your award? Well, if you've been in business prior to January 19th, or even as of January 1, 2019, you use calculation 1, and that corresponds to table 1 in the application that you can access on our website. This is the most straightforward calculation method, and it's simply a year-over-year comparison. So you'll start with your gross receipts for 2019. And then from that, you'll subtract out your 2020 gross receipts and all Paycheck Protection Program funds that you have received. Now let's linger on that for just a moment. And this is relevant for you regardless of what payment you use to calculate your award. If you received any Paycheck Protection Program, whether it's in 2020 or in 2021, whether it's a first draw loan or a second draw loan or even an increase, all of that must be subtracted from your funding award. Moving on to calculation 2. This is available for any applicant that began operating at some point during 2019, but they weren't in business for the entire year. Now, if that applies to you, you have the option of using either calculation 2 or calculation 3. It's for you to decide whatever is in your best interest. So if you decide to use calculation 2, which corresponds to table 2 in the application, basically what you're doing here is you're calculating your average 2019 monthly gross receipts, so that you can take that and annualize it for 2019. And then you subtract out your 2020 gross receipts and PPP. And before your eyes glaze over, or maybe it's too late, we will walk you through a sample calculation of what that would look like. And then calculation 3, which corresponds to table 3 in the application, is a bit more complicated, but it's a very helpful option that we have for people who are in certain circumstances. So people who, for example, haven't yet started operating at their business. Maybe they have a restaurant that they had just purchased, or they were remodeling, but they had never opened it to sales yet. And then the pandemic hit and it still isn't open. This would be for you. This is also available for you at your option if you started operations partly through 2019. This is the process that you would use if you began operations at some point during 2020. And then the last category of person who might use this, again, this is at your option, is if you were closed partway through for part of 2019, let's say your business suffered a fire or a flood, or you were ill and you had to close for a period of time in 2019. In that case, you would have the option of using either calculation 1 or calculation 3. So let's look at this. How would you calculate your award if you were using calculation 3? Well, this is based off of what you have spent. This is based off of eligible expenses, money that you've spent between February 15, 2020 and March 11, 2021. So let's look at this example. Let's say you want to use this method and you begin by totaling up all of the eligible expenses that you've made during that time frame. You'll subtract out all of your sales that you've made from February of, actually it's 2020. So all of your gross receipts in 2020 through through March 11th of 2021. So that total sales there is slightly incorrect there. And then you'll subtract out your PPP fund. So let's look at this. Let's say you had expenses totaling $725,000 and your gross receipts in 2020 through March 11 of 2021 was $350,000. You'd subtract that. And then you would subtract out your PPP funding of $125,000. That means that your grant amount would equal $250,000. Diana, do you have anything to add to that? I know I went through that a little quickly.
No, it's a fairly simple calculation here, but we know that your realities may be much more complicated. The one thing I would want to point out is that, you're going to be completing this electronically. So you will see, as the administrator indicated, there's a guided path. So there's hover over buttons, there's support and answers in the system as you input your application. So the tables and the calculations that Ginger has walked through is a lot of narrative. And it's a lot to take in when you're sitting here and you don't have your application and your documents in front of you. But I want you to be comforted by the fact that when you go into that portal, it will take you step by step through this calculation so that you can get it right. And in the event you have questions, we do have resources to support you in that process as well. So.
And if you want a hard copy of this process, we do have a sample application form on the website as well, and that's sba.gov/restaurants. There's one other option here. I don't think it's on the slide deck. It's calculation 4 or table 4. And this would be relevant if you have more than one location. So for example, let's say you have a restaurant that was in operations starting in 2015. You would use table 1 or calculation 1 for that restaurant. Let's say you have a second restaurant that began operations midway through 2020. You would use calculation 3 for that restaurant. And then if you had a restaurant that began midway through 2019, you would use table 2 or calculation 2 for that restaurant. So table 4 in the application is a method for you to calculate all of your funds through the various tables and then aggregate your total grant amount in one place. That's where you'd put the total aggregate grant amount from all of your various locations in table 4.
Yeah, that's right. So we've tried to anticipate various scenarios. Those that have been a long time in business, very stable, no new locations, those that are brand new and were scheduled to open in 2020, and those that had both existing and new restaurants. So we've tried to cover the gamut there to make sure we understand and accept all of the realities and situations that you're faced with. So again, each one of those is laid out not only in the guide that Ginger has referenced on the website, not only in this PowerPoint, but also, and most importantly, in the platform through which you'll submit your applications.
Okay, so let's take a look at what you will not include as part of your 2020 gross receipts. Remember, 2020 gross receipts is a reduction from your grant amount. So when you list your 2020 gross receipts, do not include any of the things that are listed on this slide as part of your 2020 gross receipts. So this basically is any type of help that you received to help you get through the pandemic. It includes any proceeds from PPP, any SBA Section 1112 payments that you might have received. I imagine a good number of you on this call have received that help, so that's not included in your gross receipts, as well as any SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Assistance, any state and local business grants that you might have received. And this last bullet is a program specifically from the Department of Education. Next. All right, so let's talk about the period of time that you have to use these funds. And let me start by saying we do not anticipate anyone's going to have a problem using your funds within the allotted period of time. And the main reason is, look, it's backward facing. So when you get your funds, you have until no later than March 11th, 2023 to use those funds. However, you can count your expenses starting on February 15th, 2020. So my recommendation is set up a ledger that matches all of the eligible uses of funds categories that we had on a prior slide, and just keep track of which category you used your grant funds for. And that way it'll be easiest for you when you do your certification at the end. Now, if your business permanently closes after you receive your funds, that stops the period of time in which you have to use the funds. So bear that in mind. And at the end of the time that you have to use your funds, you have to return any that you haven't used to the government. And again, SBA does not anticipate this is going to be a problem for anyone.
Right. And Ginger, a couple of points here. When you finish using your money, if that happens in 6 months or in 3 months, because you were paying past due rent that accrued, utilities that accrued during this period in 2020, when you had no ability to operate, then you at that point in time can submit the document back in a document, and we will provide the guidance on that. A document that says, I have used my funds in accordance with the program. Thank you very much. And guess what? No more SBA on this. This is not a forgivable loan. It is a grant, as the administrator mentioned in the beginning, but we do, as a grant, need to understand and have a certification at the end that you will have used those funds, that you have expended them for the purposes. And again, it's a pretty wide range of uses, both retro to 2020 and in the future up until March 11th, 2023. So feel free, and we encourage you at the time you have used those funds in accordance with that to go ahead and kick that notice back in, certifying that you've used those proceeds so that you can go on and run the business and not have to deal with any kind of review and forgiveness and those kinds of things. So the same happens if the business permanently closes. If you haven't expended all the funds at the time you close the business, there is an obligation to return the funds. If you've spent all those funds, then we would expect you to file that report. If you sell the business, we would expect you to certify that you've used the funds prior to sale or return the funds before the sale. So little nuances there to keep in mind. Next slide. Okay, Ginger, I'll take this one and give you a bit of a break. Funds, now where it says don't count them as gross receipts, what will happen then is we will deduct the benefit that you've received, if any, from all PPP loans received first and or second. We do connect, and it's not that easy. So we ask you to be very cautious about using the same EINs, ITINs, social security numbers, et cetera, that you did for the PPP if you had PPP. And let me make this comment because I had an interesting call from someone this morning that I haven't received any benefit at all. Why am I not included? You absolutely are included. So what would happen is your eligible funding amount would not be reduced by a PPP amount. It would be a higher amount if you've not received the benefit of PPP or EIDL, et cetera. So in fact, you are eligible if you've never participated in any of the disaster programs to date, as long as you are an otherwise eligible business. So what we would then reduce from your gross calculation of eligible fund amount is the PPP loan proceeds from any first and second draw related to the corporate entity and its individual locations that receive benefit. So this is one of those things that will save you time in processing and getting to your award. Please sync the EIN number with your tax return 4506T with your PPP loan. So take a look at that. Make sure you have all that available. Make sure it's accurate. Sometimes we fat finger a key and it just misses a number or a digit. Do that in advance so it doesn't cost you time in the platform, so you can move on. This is just one of those things that are going to cause the system to have to pull in manual resources to support it, and we will do that, but it takes more time. And we know that we have limited funds. We have a lot of people that are eligible for the benefit, and so we don't want you to have any problems in processing. That's one of the areas that we've seemed to have the most issues in terms of PPP, and that's using different EINs. Okay, if you are applying for the RRF program and you have a pending PPP loan application, what should you do? My recommendation would be, if you have not received the proceeds, would be to cancel and withdraw your application. This is a decision that you as a business owner can make, but the use of proceeds in the RRF are broader. You can use them for principal and interest payments instead of just interest payments. You can use them for payroll. You can use them for utilities. You can use them for any legitimate business expense that was listed in the prior slide. So there's more latitude there, and there's no obligation to submit a request for forgiveness. It is not a loan, it is a grant. So those are things you need to consider, from PPP to shuttered venues, operating grants, and to also RRF. So it's a lot to juggle in your mind, but it can't be duplicative in its benefit. So, if you've got something outstanding you haven't received on PPP, my recommendation would be to withdraw it, and that would plus up. It would allow you to get an increase in the eligible RRF funding amount. Next slide. Okay, we're talking about our priority groups here. And just to be clear, that the business concern is at least 51% owned, and the management and the daily business operations of the applicant are controlled by one or more individuals who are women, veterans, socially and economically disadvantaged. The applicants self-certify in the application that they meet these eligibility requirements, and you're not allowed to reorganize your company real quickly to make it be one of these things. So if my spouse generously says, here's, we're 50-50 partners, I'm going to make you 51, so we're eligible, the answer is you will be disqualified. So it is the organization as it existed on the date that the legislation was enacted by the president. Any additional comments on that, Ginger, or we're good to go?
I have been answering questions.
Okay, well, let's move on.
Not sure what that.
Okay, so just doubling back here so that we've got clarity. Socially disadvantaged. There are racial that have been subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice or cultural bias as a member of a group without regard to their individual qualities. So we have Black Americans, we have Hispanic, we have Native Americans, including Alaska Natives, Asian Pacific Americans, or subcontinent Asian Americans. These are considered socially disadvantaged groups. You may, in fact, be also socially or economically disadvantaged for other reasons. And if you feel that is the case, you must include in your decision, the narrative discussion on why that would be the case. So one that comes to my mind is someone who has physical handicaps or physical disabilities, some that would have precluded them from participating in mainstream credit opportunities and other social opportunities. So next slide. And remember, the issue here is that for 21 days, this group will get approvals. We are taking applications starting Monday, May 3rd for all. None of the grant awards will be presented, or none of the funds awards will be made for entities that do not fall in that category until the 22nd day. This is our application information. You can apply directly through the platform, and this is direct from you to restaurants and we have various different things, restaurants at, etc. Remember this, restaurants.sba.gov, and this looks like a live link here. We usually do our presentations with a live link, and so I'm going to assume that that you could click here and it would take you directly there. We have connected with several of the very large point of sale vendors, large and common. Many of you use Clover, Aloha Square, and Toast. They will be able to assist you with your point of sale records to document your revenues, and that's an option. They have a direct connection to SBA, and they will be able to process through for you. And we also have a telephone line at 844-279-8898. We will warn you that if you have to use the humans, gosh, we're just not as good as computers. Well, I think we're as good as, but maybe not as quick as computers. So those applications will take a bit longer because we'll refer them to our individual resources internally here at SBA, and we have beefed up those resources to be able to provide this service. But anything you can do electronically is going to speed that action up. So if you use a point of sale vendor, that's great. You can use the platform independently. If you need additional support, we're very, very happy to do it. But because we're going to have to do it individual by individual, it will take a bit longer to get those things processed. Next slide. Okay, documents. Our application form 3172 is posted on the website. It needs to be completed, initialed, and signed. We do have DocuSign. So you're not necessarily married to a paper form. It is a form number assigned because for the collection of data that we do on the form, but you'll be keying this information in online, or your that point of sale vendor, that information will be collected electronically there. We do verify tax information using a form 4506T. This form is for your business, not for the individuals who own the business. Make sure that you're sending that in and you're signing on behalf of the business to allow SBA to communicate with IRS to confirm tax returns. And along those lines, we do understand that many haven't filed 2020 tax returns, and sometimes the IRS doesn't have the record available to them. And so we will work through those instances as they come up, but we do appreciate that that may be our reality as we go along. Gross documentation, any of the following documents demonstrating gross receipts, and if applicable, those that are using the expenses for 2020 when you haven't been open for a long period of time. Business tax returns can be used, and we actually must have the business tax returns for 2019. Schedule C, Schedule F, partnerships, all of these documents you'll need to have available to you in submitting bank statements, externally and internally prepared financial statements. And I'll let Ginger walk you through when we can take those and when you might use those in point of sale reports, of course. Next slide. Okay, you want to take it from here, Ginger?
Sure. As Diana said, oh, is there an echo? No, okay.
No, you're good.
As Diana said, there is a list of documentation that's required. We do have an extensive list in the knowledge base where the link is posted. And when you apply, the platform will also help you identify what documents you need to upload. Just be aware that if you are applying as one of the business types that has to document that at least 33% of your sales were for on-site sales of food and or beverage to the public, or 33% of your sales were for on-site sales to the public for those that are alcohol vendors like the brew pubs, there's additional documentation that you need to upload. So whatever you can upload that documents that you met that 33% threshold will be acceptable. The easiest format for us to accept are your Tax and Trade Bureau or TTB Bureau forms. If you don't have that available, state or local forms that you filed. And then if you don't have any of that available, you can go to internally created reports. If you're if you're applying as an inn, that's a category where you have to document that 33% of your on-site sales were for food or beverage to the public. We need to see some type of documentation on that as well. All right, next slide. I think we've already covered this. If you have help, there are multiple ways that you can get help. If you want to speak to a live human, the best way to do that is through our call center, and the number is posted there. We have many languages available and supported at that hotline. If you're like me and you like to do some online snooping around first, then I recommend using that knowledge base. Again, it has more than 100 questions and answers, and it was built from your questions, people that we have asked questions in previous webinars. And we do have our district offices that are equipped to help you as well. The best way for you to prepare to make sure that you submit a complete application and that you can make sure that we can process your application as quickly as possible is to arm yourself with the facts. Look at that documentation requirements, make sure you're giving it to us in full, leverage all of your resources. If you're not sure, reach out to an accountant or a CPA or a friend who's knowledgeable in accounting and bookkeeping. SBA is not able to make application corrections. So if you realize after the fact that you've made an error, you're going to have to reach out to that call center, the 800 number, and go through them, and they'll walk you through the steps. But again, bear in mind, that's going to slow down your application processing. So it's better to take an extra hour, stop, walk away, come back, look at your application with fresh eyes before you hit the done or submit button to make sure that your application is complete and correct the first time. And then the final bullet is very important, and I've seen a couple of questions on that in the chat panel. If you still intend to apply for PPP, we're advising you to apply for PPP first before you do your RRF application. Now, that's easier said than done because we have impending deadlines for both programs. So really, you're probably going to have to make a choice as to which way you're going to go. Bear in mind, PPP is a forgivable loan, whereas the restaurant's grant program is not a loan. It's a grant as long as you can certify that you spent it on eligible expenses. So that's a little tricky situation for your consideration there. All right, now we're going to turn it over to Jen Lee Lowe.
Thank you. Diana, Ginger, thank you so much. You know what? I've sat through, as an owner of a restaurant, I've sat through 3 of these before, and I'll tell you, I'm still frantically taking notes. I know a lot of the attendees have them type up some chat questions. Please use the chat or the Q&A. So if we can just go ahead and start with some. I know that you had mentioned about the PPP, right? Ginger and Diana. Can you please, because I think there's a couple of, Cynthia has asked that she's a little bit confused because she's currently applying for PP2, but still she hasn't received the answer. So she wants to know, is it better to mention it or not mention it during her application?
Right. So what will happen if she submits the application while there is a PPP application pending? The system will see that, and it's going to stop. It's going to stop there and say, we need to fix this one way or the other. It's going to go. So, I would definitely communicate with my PPP lender to see what the status is. And I would consider, seriously whether I wanted to proceed or not. As you probably know, we're running low on funds in PPP as well. So that timeline is not going to likely make it to May 31st. So,
okay. Good.
Both funds have limited, both programs have limited funds. But I expect that the PPP loans are going to be expended definitely before the end of May. And of course, they come with more strings attached and limited uses of proceeds. So I think it's maybe a difficult decision, but those are the things that you have to consider. But if the system sees it, if you send it in, the system will see that you have a PPP loan pending or even approved and not funded, and it will queue it out for resolution.
Great. And then so as a follow-up though, you have a slide that says, if we choose to withdraw the PP2, so what's the process of withdrawing that request?
Yeah, this would have to come through your lender. So that means you got to get your hands around that lender and get them to move it in. And we know, and as you do as well, you don't always get, the immediate service. Everybody's resources are being redirected. Everybody's overworked, et cetera. So you got to be relentless or tenacious in getting that done, because you cannot do it directly. It has to be done through your lender. So
Thank you.
hopefully they'll communicate with you.
Great. I have a question from Dwayne. He asked, what documents are needed if your 2020 taxes have not been filed yet?
That's very circumstantial, because it depends on whether you have been in business for all of 2019, whether you've opened any new location, whether you were, what were the reasons you were shuttered, what was the period you were shuttered. So it's kind of like not a one size fits all answer.
Okay. And he indicated that he has been in business for 10 years.
Okay, so then.
I'll post the link to the knowledge base article too, so
Okay.
everyone can see that.
That sounds
Perfect.
good.
Thanks, Ginger. All right, I know Ginger has been frantically multitasking. She answered 9 of the questions, but we still have 9 outstanding ones. And if we can maybe answer them quickly live. This one is from Vicky. Number 1, are cash and credit card tips considered gross receipts?
Yes, cash is a gross receipt.
And tips, I think, and credit card tips, I think.
Yeah. We have probably misguided you somewhat in the past. The current decision is that if it is reported online 1C, it cannot be reduced in terms of reporting. So I do believe, after researching, that tip income for the employer, i.e. that shows up on the credit card check, or even service fees, because if there's a required tip, it's not considered a tip, it's considered a service fee, that it is reported in gross receipts, and so it would be counted in gross receipts.
But remember, we're comparing like to like. So the tips would be included in your 2019 and in your 2020. So it's like to like.
Gotcha. And then Vicky also had a second question. Are liquor taxes collected from customers and remitted to city tax authority considered gross receipts?
So in the program guide that we have available on our website, we have, and it's toward the back of it, we list each federal tax return that you might use depending on business type. And we tell you the exact line from the tax return that you can use to as your gross receipts number, if that's helpful, rather than getting into each of the situations.
That is helpful. Thank you so much, Ginger. Next, will businesses making food in their home and selling directly to customers be eligible for this grant?
Good question. I would say if this business is considered a caterer, then they would be eligible. If they're reporting their income through as a business, if they're licensed and the health department does all those things they make you do when you produce food from the same location that you reside, if you're considered a caterer, then you would be eligible.
Thank you, Diana. The SVOG portal login is somewhat challenging for those IT challenged. Will there be a screen-by-screen guide on how to set up an account password before tomorrow?
Yes, the short answer is it's very, very guided. And there's a path you can take if you need more guidance than others that may not. But yes, there is. And that's why we encourage you to go in and register, and you have the 2 or 3 days to do that before we're ready to accept the application. Please familiarize yourself.
Thank you. Next one, there has been different responses on how companies apply via parent EIN, each individual EIN, one account, multiple EINs, etc. How do you recommend we apply for RFF based on PPP application?
Yeah. So this has been the biggest challenge of the first and second draw, as you all know, that participated in PPP. The system recognizes it. First of all, you're only entitled to a second draw loan if you've received a first draw loan. And the system considers a unique identifier to be your EIN, whatever that is, whether it's an ITIN, an SSN, or whatever. So the system goes and looks for it and says, I don't see this. You didn't have a first draw loan. You're not eligible. So the same thing is going to happen here. If you're not syncing your EINs to what happened in PPP, then when it gets to that comparison, when it hits the system and says, hey, what's my PPP? It's going to say, wait a minute, we have a problem here, Houston. This EIN doesn't have a second draw, but they have a first draw. They split it up for the purpose of the second. So it's important. If you only have one EIN, then it's easy. It comes in through the parent. And many times in the first draw loan, we did get a loan from the parent on behalf of their stable of businesses who each had their own EINs as well. So it is going to be tricky. The best thing you can do is disclose every EIN that received a PPP loan so that the system can aggregate them and come to the correct calculation that you have. So it's one of those very situational things too. If you use the same EIN through all of PPP, you should have no trouble.
Thank you, Diana. Okay, next question. For new business not open yet as of March 11, 2021, does that mean leasehold improvement costs are not eligible?
That's a really good question too, because generally for the businesses that have been in business, we don't reimburse them and we don't permit leasehold improvements to be a legitimate expense unless those improvements are related to the pandemic. So if it's cordoning off plastic screens and redirecting traffic and things like that, then the answer would be yes. But if it's in general that I want to remodel, then it would be no. So if you apply that then to the new, you really need to stay in the expenses. However, if you took out a loan to get the leaseholds done and you still obviously have to pay on that loan, but you're still not open, those payments are legitimate. Absolutely 100%. Any construction loan, principal and interest payments would be eligible. So to some, it's kind of a twisted turn, but we really didn't provide an avenue for businesses to be able to improve other than to deal with whatever the pandemic related issues were, the extra seating outside, et cetera.
Thank you, Diana. And I want to be sensitive of the time. There's 3 more minutes in this. We want to thank you, Ginger and Diana. Are there other opportunities? I know we have about 7 more and it gets, we have more questions and questions. I know from nationalace.org website, we have several upcoming webinars today and tomorrow that folks can join. But what about any advice? Ginger, Diana, last, words of advice for all of us?
Thank you very much for doing what you do. I did take a little drive this morning. I don't get out of the office much, but I went past tons of strip centers and I made it a point to count how many food places were in each one of those to see the magnitude of the devastation to this industry. So I would say that, as you know, we have only $28.4 billion. That's nowhere touches the number of businesses. I trust that ACE and the team here will be speaking to your representatives, as you should, about the need to continue to support this in the short run to get us beyond that. I also want to do just a quick advertisement for SBA. We've been outed as a really, really cool place to do business. We have long-term programs. We do startups. We do very small. We do a lot of things, working capital and revolving lines. So don't forget us once we get stabilized and beyond this emergency that we're in. We have no-cost counseling and resources, entrepreneurial development. Please take advantage of everything here and know that we're here to serve long-term. It's easy to say be patient, but I say not only be patient, but be tenacious. Just stay with us and keep pitching. So thank you so much for the opportunity to give people as much information as we can before we kick open the doors and move forward with making the payments.
And thank you so much. Seriously, you guys are on my speed dial. Seriously. For everybody, the questions, I know you have wonderful questions. We are not able to answer all of them, but we will get them all questions. If it's okay with you, Ginger and Diana, that we can fire them over to you, and then we can send a follow-up email to all attendees today and those who cannot join today. Is that okay?
Yes, please do. We want to see all the questions. We want to go through our text every day. We go through
Yes.
everything that we have in terms of guidance before day one when we open. I would advise you to look frequently at what's there, because as we refine it based on your specific questions, those things may change. So make sure you're checking it regularly until the time we start, because this is how we're best informed about what we didn't clearly communicate. We want to do that.
Sounds great. And on behalf of National ACE, thank you all for joining. And we want to thank once again, Administrator Guzman. On behalf of Schilling, is already jumping on another call already. So I'm going to wrap this up. Ginger, Diana, thank you once again. And I want to recognize the team, Ace, Daniel, and Emily on the background. Thank you. Oh, there is Schilling. Schilling is back. Should I turn this back to you to close out? We're good. Okay. Thank you so much. And have a wonderful weekend. It's going to be a busy weekend.
Busy for all of us. Thank you.
Yes.
Hopefully
Thank you.
successful.
Thank you. Bye-bye.